The middle finger of your left hand is indented with a callus, the trademark of a writer. And you were carrying the Hunter's Encyclopedia of Disease, a handbook not available to the general public.
And the custard tarts?
Simple. There's a distinct stain of yellow custard on your lapel. That particular colour of custard is used in the making of custard tarts, and, well, your shape convinced me that you've eaten many of them before.
There's no need to be rude.
So 1985's Young Sherlock Holmes is the unofficial story of how John Watson arrives in London and meets fellow pupil Sherlock Holmes, the pair hitting it off pals, but when Holmes becomes intrigued by a series of suicides, his natural powers of deduction kick in, and the pair, along with Holmes's love interest Elizabeth, begin investigating. Soon they uncover the truth and come face to face with an ancient cult. Let's take a look. So the plot here sees a bunch of well-regarded gentlemen who suffer hallucinogenic delusions that lead to their deaths ultimately, after they've been struck by a mysterious blow dart from a hooded baddie. The deaths are looked upon by the police as either suicide or unfortunate accidents, but of course Holmes takes it upon himself to look into these events, much to the annoyance of Detective Lestrade.
I believe I'm onto something.
Oh, not again.
This time I'm certain of it.
Really? Just like last month when you were convinced that the French ambassador had embezzled £300,000 from the Bank of England.
I was close. It was the Russian ambassador.
Oh, Holmes, please.
And obviously along for this ride are Watson and Holmes's girlfriend Elizabeth, played by Sophie Ward, whose primary function is to be a damsel in distress, but will also play a key part in the evolution of the man Holmes will become. Now, full disclosure, this is a personal childhood favourite of mine, so I'll gush about it just a little bit more than many people would. I'm also not oblivious to its flaws totally. So one quick thing to mention is that the film was written by Chris Columbus, director of the first two Home Alone movies and the first two Harry Potter movies, and one Steven Spielberg was an executive producer, and their fingerprints are all over this film. Now, subsequent TV star Nick Rowe plays the famous detective here. It's a good bit of casting, I think. Alan Cox plays his trusty future sidekick Watson, and Sophie Ward plays Elizabeth. And that year she also played a young version of the terrifying Mombi in Return to Oz. Now basically the entire cast here is populated by TV and stage actors, which I'm guessing freed up the budget required to pay for the then cutting edge visual effects work, which we'll get to in a little bit. Now, Young Sherlock Holmes always feels a little bit like a Christmas movie to me. I think it's got that Dickensian London setting, and maybe the fact that it seems to be always snowing gives it a bit of a festive vibe. I do love the Basil Rathbone wartime set movies, but Holmes kind of belongs in the 1800s, all horses and carriages and top hats. Now, it's against this backdrop that the film provides a possible first encounter between Watson and Holmes, this being non-canon. As Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had introduced the pair much later in life in his 1887 story A Study in Scarlet. Here, of course, the school chums, although the school element only factors for a time as Holmes is expelled and thus able to do his sleuthing in relative freedom. Now, this really is a film of two halves, the first being the strongest in my opinion. I've always loved seeing Sherlock using his powers of deduction, butting heads with the local law enforcement who of course see him as just a meddling kid, and building a relationship with Watson. And I love seeing Sherlock pick up his trademark items throughout the film, his hat, pipe and coat, etc. And Nick Rowe's great here, going up against the adult cast as the titular future detective. It's a shame he didn't get to continue with the character.
They're also responsible for the 4 young girls who mysteriously disappeared last month. I beg of you, begin an investigation.
Based on what? Your imagination?
A great detective relies on perception, intelligence and imagination.
Where'd you get that rubbish from?
It's framed on the wall behind you.
Now, once the plot kicks into gear and the whole idea of an Egyptian cult is introduced, it quickly becomes less a classic sleuthing tale and more of an out-and-out adventure movie. And I think that's where the Spielbergian comparison comes in. Ancient rituals, baddies chasing our heroes around pyramids with curved swords, and the mummification of young girls, which I'm still not 100% sure what happened there. Seems very Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom to me, which of course Spielberg had made the year earlier. Don't get me wrong, it does inject some welcome action to proceedings. I'm also not 100% unsure what the audience for this film initially was. This is simultaneously why I think the film didn't do as well as the filmmakers hoped, but also why it's become something of a cult classic. And it pushes into that bracket of 80s family films that were too scary for kids. Releases such as The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and Return to Oz, and even The Never-Ending Story. They all have aspects to them that are the stuff of nightmares. And in the Young Sherlock Holmes, as I've mentioned, the plot involves assassination via a powerful hallucinogen. And this is an excuse for the production to use their entire bag of tricks, whether it's puppet work in the inadvertently hilarious opening scene involving chicken dinner's return to life, stop motion in a still bizarre graveyard food invasion scene that's so odd that even now I'm astonished by it.
No.
But the Young Sherlock Holmes will forever be immortalised by the knight that steps out of a stained glass window in a stunning effect that was the first ever completely CGI effect in a motion picture. And it was overseen by effects legend John Lasseter, the film also giving a very early credit for a little known company named Pixar. I'm pretty sure that I read the film was released at some point as Young Sherlock Holmes and the Pyramid of Fear, probably before the chances of a franchise were dashed. That title's very Indiana Jones-like, and of course Indy would have his own origin tale told in the early 90s Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Now, I also read somewhere that there have been more than 250 screen adaptations of Sherlock Holmes' adventures. Now, of course, I haven't seen all of those, but this one has remained one of my favourites over the years. Also, stick around for a teasing post-credit scene. Go check it out.
Come on, we haven't got all day.
Well, hang on, where are we going?
You wouldn't want to miss chemistry class, would you?
By the way, what's your name?
Holmes. Sherlock Holmes.